faceoff. Shoots it, deflected right in. Pietrangelo save rebound. Stastny stopped by Pietrangelo. I don't believe that save. Neither does Peter Stastny. He can't believe the save that Pietrangelo just made on him as Frankie sparkling on that maneuver there to stop and rob Peter Stastny. He should get 5 to 10 for that.
Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Tendy Talk, presented by the BLPA and the Hockey Podcast Networks. I am your host, Joe, better known as Wash Up Goalie on social media. This week I chat with the all-time AHL wins by an American-born goalie, Mike McKenna, who played 14 years professional hockey with 22 teams in the NHL, AHL, and ECHL. Mike and I cover a whole slew of topics, from his recent bike trip across the state of Missouri, the best food city he's visited as a player, and so many more topics. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Mike. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining me on the podcast. I have to say, it's a thrill to have you on as a goalie who, I felt like I had to work harder than the other goalies. You probably felt the same way, where it's just really fun to connect with you. And at the same time, I'm a Chicago-born kid, so talking to St. Louis, I have a few teammates from down that way. Some of them you probably know because we're about the same age. So the Chicago-St. Louis rivalry is always fun as well.
Well, I remember those games at the old arena in St. Louis. You never knew what was going to happen.
Absolutely.
The Blackhawks would show up, and I mean, it was Detroit and Chicago, and I feel like those three teams really were kind of interchangeable in the rivalries that they had. That you had to have your head on a swivel in the stands, even because you didn't know if the fights were going to break out. And it's funny because I think so many people become so tribalistic about their cities, and obviously, I'll sit here and I can't stand the Cubs, and I mean, honestly, I really don't care. I don't even have Bally Sports this year because they quit on YouTube TV. So I haven't watched a baseball game all year, but it was kind of the same way. That's as a kid, I thought, I can't stand the Blackhawks and blah, blah, blah. And then as you get older, you really realize how much I appreciated watching Ed Belfour when I was a kid. Just how, so many things that he did that were pretty new and different to the position, and when, especially later on, I remember when he went into the Hall of Fame, I wrote a piece for In Goal magazine that was a tribute to him being inducted, and it just kind of came back in waves, whole era of our childhood, and just how much all those goaltenders and teams in general, you hated the Blackhawks, but man, you were so excited for those games when they came into town.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I hated Curtis Joseph with a passion for obvious reasons. He was a Blackhawk killer, but as I look back on it, I always appreciated his play. It was just he wore the wrong laundry.
That's right.
That was
the wrong gitch.
But it's just so funny. Like Curtis Joseph, same thing. I hated, or not Curtis, it was Felix Potvin. Just hated him because he was a Blackhawk killer. But now there's such.
But he had the best mask in the league, man.
No, he didn't. Eddie Belfour did. I will die on that hill. But it was dark. Yeah, his mask was pretty sweet. And, he was one of the early ones, with his own graphic on a pad too, with those cat pads. It was just awesome. But it is funny. And I've heard you on your podcast, 6 Degrees, talk about, you reach a certain point where, you have your team, but you've either, in your case, enough guys on different teams, but you reach a certain level where you're just a fan of the game.
Yeah.
You want a good game, and that's more important than I shouldn't say it. When the Blackhawks were in the Stanley Cup Finals, I absolutely wanted them to win. But
I'm sure, Well, it's a different dynamic when you go off. I mean, you leave home at 16 years old.
Yeah.
Like I did, to play junior hockey. And then I'm at college, and then I play 14 years of pro and get paid by 13 or 14 different organizations. And you lose that loyalty and hometown draw. I mean, you're not going to walk around if you're getting paid by let's say Florida Panthers, in your spare time, you're not walking around in a St. Louis Blues hat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You become agnostic to teams in general. And especially because I ended up having friends all around the league, I'm rooting for my friends to just do well. And I just want to watch good hockey. And, I even had people who felt like it was disappointing that when the Blues won the Stanley Cup, that I didn't have this deep rooted connection where I was turning handsprings in the front yard, and I was like, no, man, I'm super happy that they won. I still have that hometown thing, but it was more so like happy for my friends that really got to revel in this. And for me, it was almost kind of like, it was almost nostalgic for me, looking back at my childhood when I was such a fan of that team and thinking of, my dad and grandpa and everybody that used to go to games. And it hit very differently for me. It was still cool, but you're right in that, like, now I don't have a dog in the fight anymore. It feels like, I'm just a fan of goalies first and hockey second.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you brought up your grandpa, because if anybody's listened to any of your podcasts or any of the stuff you've been on, he was an off-ice official back when they had goal judges in the NHL. Something I wish they would bring back just for the nostalgia of it. But when you grew up, hockey wasn't as big as it is now in St. Louis. But because of your grandpa, you were exposed to the game, and that's clearly how you were interested in it.
Yeah.
I got to think down there, from what I know of my teammates that are from there, you had maybe 2 ice rinks. You had Kirkwood and Afton.
Oh no, we probably had 20 something sheets when I was a kid.
Oh really? I didn't realize there were that many.
Yeah. Hockey was really on the cusp of growing. But a lot of it, were outdoors. They were, we had chain link fences at some of them. Like, it's not like it is now where you walk in, it's the Taj Mahal to hockey at these places. Like, they just built a new 3.5 sheet or 3 sheet in the winter or in the summer, 4 sheet in the winter rink here in St. Louis, Centene Community Ice Center that the Blues helped build in Maryland Heights. And this place is just immaculate.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up playing outdoors with chain link fences and no roof, right? You'd have to shovel the snow. And I understand this is old guy talk, and I'm 38. Like, imagine being like my grandpa, who started when you had to literally shovel the lake if you wanted to skate, like, this is how it's changed. And, when I was a kid, there were 50 something high school teams, and that's the same way, but like, really none of us really thought going beyond high school hockey was realistic, because that's all people had done from St. Louis when I was a kid. Nobody played in the NHL. Very few players had gone even to college hockey at that point. Nobody knew how to get there. And we were just playing for the fun of it. I played 2 years of high school hockey, and that was huge for me. I got to play in front of my school, like my classmates. I played in front of a crowd. I got to play against older competition. I made it as a freshman. I'm 13 playing against 18-year-olds. Like, these are like men compared to me, and now, like, at that age group, right, you're thinking, oh my God, like, these guys can shoot. And that was a huge step for me, playing varsity hockey as a freshman, and I look back at it now, and it's like, the hockey isn't great at all, but man, it was cool. It was
sure
fun.
Felt that way when we were that age, though.
Yeah. And it was competitive. Like, people gave a shit, and that's really what mattered.
I remember I think I was a peewee. Yeah, it was my second year playing, and I was playing house league hockey. And for whatever reason, our coach entered us into a travel tournament in Pekin, Illinois. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Plenty of tournaments in Peoria, Pekin. Yep.
Yeah, and we were playing the Afton Americans, and they were just smoking everybody in this tournament. And we're like, oh boy, our final game is against Afton. We are just going to get it handed to us. And somehow we kept it to single digits. And after that game, it was just like, the handshake, the kids were like, hey, you guys played really, because everybody knew we were the house league team in this tournament.
Right.
And, those kids were coming up to us like, hey, you guys said really, you played well. But I still remember how good that Afton team was all these years later. And it was like,
Afton was always, I honestly don't know if I ever beat Afton as a kid, and like, I ended up playing in the NHL, but I couldn't beat Afton. I thought I was going anywhere because I couldn't beat Afton. And then, and in goal, like, here's the thing, like, people will think this about goaltenders is kind of like a selfish or egotistical thing when we say, like, I couldn't beat. Well, guess what? The columns for goalies are wins, losses, and ties. Right. So you know what? We can say that. It's okay to say that. That's not braggadocious in any way. I couldn't beat them. And then, like, in college, I couldn't beat Cornell.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't. And then I get to pro. Man, I couldn't beat Hershey. They just waxed me endlessly, it felt like. And then the NHL, I couldn't beat the Caps, like, there's always that boogeyman team out there.
Absolutely. But there's always that team that you just, for whatever reason, you perform well against them.
Dominate. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was Augsburg College for me. Whenever we played them, especially in their barn, I don't know why. I just had a game.
I was so good in a couple buildings, especially in the American Hockey League. Anybody that followed my career knows that that's where really I made most of my living. You know, I was a number 3 goaltender. I've never made any bones about being more than that. But man, I hardly ever lost in Syracuse. Like I was so good. And I think it's because I loved playing there. Like those old shitty rinks to me are so much fun. I loved playing there. And then I got to play for them. We ended up going to the Calder Cup finals. Like awesome. And another rink was Adirondack when that was the Phantom. So when it was the Flyers there, man, I never lost there. And ironically, that's where my wife's from. So I always have my in-laws there. And like, I tell you, you get a first or a second star in that building, you just go take a huge victory lap before you come off. And like, you know, the one year I was playing for Albany, we played in Adirondack ton. It's only like 45 minutes away. And if we played there on a Saturday night and had Sunday off, I'd just stay there Saturday night. My wife would come and we'd stay at her parents, you know, and have a day. Yeah. Like people wonder why I enjoyed the minor leagues.
Yeah.
Like that's a great example, man. Like it just crazy shit happened in the minors. Sometimes you really, as dysfunctional as it could be. And frankly, as heartbreaking as it could be at times when like, you know, you deserve a call up, but there's no chance you're getting it because you're not a prospect. That happened a couple times for me.
Yep.
It just was fun, man. Like it didn't have the same level of intensity that the NHL was. And I don't know. I had so much fun playing it and I really enjoyed it.
There's a reason they made a movie about it in the late 70s.
Yeah. And that's, it's changed a bit, but man, like, you know, when I first started playing, it was 2005 and we didn't have the Hanson brothers, but we had some 3-ring circuses, man. Like that really, the fighting in hockey and the brutality aspect, especially in the minors, it sold tickets and all those teams in Texas and all those teams, like people just wanted to see blood, dude. Period.
Look at that new documentary about Danbury, you know?
Yeah. People wanted blood. And I think that that's really been the downfall to a lot of minor league cities is that the fighting isn't there any longer. And people wanted to see blood and guts and gore and veins in my teeth and everything Arlo Guthrie talked about in Alice's Restaurant that you can hear every Thanksgiving at noon. It's just, that's different now. You know, it's pure hockey, which I mean, I love. I don't need the fights, but like, there's still nothing like 2 guys getting so pissed at each other that they drop the gloves and go.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I don't need the sideshow any longer where it's 2 guys go out and prance around and drop their gloves and have a fight for no reason. You know, it needs to be organic for me.
Yep, absolutely. And you mentioned some of those old barns. Growing up in Chicago, I went to quite a few Chicago Wolves games I still call it the Rosemont Horizon.
I was terrible in that building. I couldn't win there either.
And I got the chance to play there in high school, and even though that was what I'll call a home building for me, I don't know. There's just something about it I didn't like. The sight lines were really goofy in there.
It's dark.
Yeah, it's very really dark. It's very hot.
And it's always raining fireworks material when we're playing there as pros. And that's never fun.
Not to mention the jets flying overhead, landing at O'Hare Airport next door. I mean, there's those moments in the game where you just hear the plane and you're like, are we going to feel the impact or are they going to land at the airport?
Like this will sound so like, maybe I've got a lot of hubris saying this, but I never heard that because we have a crowd in there too.
Yeah.
But that was loud. And that the rumor was that always that the Wolves pumped in crowd noise. And we never knew if that was true or not, but we're pretty sure that even when the crowd wasn't that big, they were cranking in crowd noise to make it sound even louder than it actually was.
I don't know. I was at their, I think it was Game 7 of the Calder Cup Finals against Bridgeport. Rick DiPietro was playing for Bridgeport that night, and Posse Nurmanen was in net for the Wolves. And I want to say it was a double or triple overtime Game 7 game that the Wolves wound up winning. And I think I had a headache for 3 days. It was so loud. It didn't help that. So I was interning at ABC News at the time in Chicago, and we're doing this great human interest story about a football player that wound up getting paralyzed like his sophomore year, but he was graduating that day. And my dad calls me and he goes, "What time are you guys going to be done?" I go, "Why?" He goes, "Well, let's drive down and see if we can get tickets to the game." And I go, "Okay." So I talked to Rob, the guy I'm interning with, and we met playing hockey down at Johnny's Ice House. So even though he was news, not sports, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to cut you loose early. You're going to that game if you can get tickets." I was like, "Sweet." So dad picks me up because lucky for us, where this kid lived was maybe 10 minutes from my house. Dad picks me up. We drive up to the north side. We just go up to the window and say, best available. We had the very last seats in the building. And of course we get there, and dad being older, he's got the bladder of a 2-year-old. So he had to use the bathroom, and then he had to get us beers and brats. So we're standing in the back. It's pitch dark right before they do their whole deal. And I can barely hear this lady. And she comes up and she goes, do you guys want to be fans of the game? And I go, okay, sure. So I tap my dad's shoulder and I tell him what's going on, and he can't hear me. And finally I look at him, I said, do you want better seats? And he goes, oh yeah. So she leads us down kind of right above where the Zamboni comes out. And we got 2 recliners to watch triple overtime game in, which was amazing. The only problem, we had 2 nuns sitting next to us that they loved the blood and gore of the game. And they were just screaming the whole time, and they had those boomsticks, and oh my God, it was like, I sat down, it's like, oh, this ought to be interesting. 2 nuns. They were ridiculous, but in a great way. And yeah, that was a game to remember, to say the least. And I was never so happy to have a recliner for a hockey game than that one.
I just got my recliner, man. I couldn't feel happier about that. I can't wait to watch hockey in it this year.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and stick to my notes, because believe it or not, I did do my homework. And one of the things I want to touch on, I'm almost happy that the first time we scheduled this recording, things happened and it fell through, because you were getting ready to go on a bike trip. And I didn't, at the time, I didn't know the backstory of that bike trip, but it's an incredible story. First of all, tell me, what you biked, and then more importantly, why you did it.
Well, it's 210 miles across the great state of Missouri on the Katy Trail, which is an old converted rail bed. It's all crushed limestone. And I rode it on my mountain bike, an old mountain bike that I kind of converted to a gravel grinder. So I put these skinnier tires on. I did what I needed to do to get this bike ready to ride this thing. So it was, it was kind of a DIY thing where I just wanted to go and do it and just ride. And the reason being was that my grandpa was just integral in my life. We did everything together. He's my best friend, passed away when I was 13 or 14. He refereed till 2 weeks before he died at 76. He's the oldest official in the United States. We'd always kind of dreamed of riding the full length of this thing. And when we were talking about it, it was probably 100 miles long or 150 back then. And
you're talking about when it was a railroad, not on your bikes together.
Well, no, they started to convert it back then, years ago. So it was kind of
ride it.
It was in its infancy as the rail bed that they converted, and is becoming a state park. And now it's up to 240 miles. Well, I decided, okay, I'm going to take the train to Sedalia, Missouri, get on my bike, and just ride. And man, it was one of those things that I felt like I had to do it. Yeah. I can't say that I've been putting it off, but the timing had never really been right for it. While I was playing would have been bad timing and training wise and everything. And everything in my life had kind of been go these past couple of years with getting integrated into broadcasting and media and things. And, this was the right time for it. And I just went, I'm doing it. Okay. Booked the trip, got off the train at like a little before noon and started to ride. And that first day I spent like 11 hours on the thing riding, and 93 miles, 1,300 feet elevation, and just nearly died. I nearly got taken out by a groundhog on a trestle bridge. My legs were dying. My saddle sores were just outrageous. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible experience. I was in so much pain.
Training camp.
I ended up riding 2 hours in pitch black darkness with no headlamp on this trail that's in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, if I hit a turtle, or if a mountain lion takes me out, or anything goes wrong, I'm in deep shit. Well, I somehow got to Jefferson City the first night, and I thought I was done. I thought I was going to take the train home the next morning. And I woke up, I felt so hungover. I didn't have a sip of alcohol, but I'd burned through, 11,000 calories and hardly eaten, couldn't drink enough water or Gatorade, and if I got up and I adjusted my seat, my handlebars, because that was the one thing I thought I needed to change. And I did that. and I rode over to breakfast in downtown Jeff City. And I was like, maybe I can do this. I changed my shorts. Like I just went to a different padding that I had on the first day. And I don't know, like, I think I just kind of more so than thought, yeah, I feel a lot better. It wasn't that. It was more like, you know what, dude, you're almost halfway there. Just do this. You can't quit,
Yeah. There's something pushing.
I also knew I was kind of in striking distance where my wife could drive a couple hours and pick me up if she had to. So off we went. And I got back on the trail and cranked another 70 something miles that second day. And got to Daniel Boone's old property in Marthasville, Missouri, and then 35 the last day. So I did 210 miles in 3 days. Wow. I'd never done more than, I think the longest ride I ever did was probably 23 or 4 miles on my mountain bike. But that's different, like you haul ass up a hill and then you get to coast and run. And like, this was just straight pedaling, like 8-10 hours a day, nonstop. Like you're pedaling that whole time. It's flat as can be, and I've got a cooler and a backpack, and I'm like, it's not like I was traveling heavy, but I'm moving every bit of 230, 40 pounds by the time you factor in the bike and everything else.
Yeah. Not one of these newer electric assist bikes either.
No, I wasn't doing that. So like, I can honestly say that it was probably the hardest physical thing I've ever done, just because it was constant and it was nonstop. And those last couple miles were just awful. But by the time I rode in and put the bike on the rack, it was just like, I did it. It's done. Grandpa, that's it. We're never doing this again, but I did it.
But how rewarding when you came home, there had to be this, I'm not even going to say a sense of accomplishment, but almost like, yeah, Grandpa, we did it.
Yeah, 100%. It really was, and it's kind of cathartic in some ways. We dreamed of this for a long time, and I didn't know if it was ever going to happen. I always told myself it would. But yeah, man, like you think of those moments in life and the people that meant a lot to you. And he meant more than anything to me. And I still have dreams every now and then where I talk to the guy,
Yeah.
And
it's funny you say that. My grandfather was a Dutch immigrant, fought in World War II. He spoke English, but every now and then I'd be talking to him and he'd drift into speaking Dutch.
Right.
Didn't understand the game of hockey, but he loved it because everybody was playing. He'd go to my cousin's baseball and softball games. He's like, it's boring. There's only 2 people playing at a time. But he loved watching me play hockey. He passed away the day Mark McGuire broke the home run record. Because I remember, like a lot of baseball fans, me and my dad were kind of turned off by the sport at that point. But that night, baseball was what, helped us that night. Because he passed away that morning. That night, we turned on the game, watched it, and it was kind of like Field of Dreams, where they're like, baseball is what brings us all together. And so that's how I remember the day my grandpa died. But the day before, or the night before my first college start, I vividly had a dream where the phone rang. My mom shouted over and she goes, it's your Opa. And that's Dutch for grandpa. And I go, and I just kind of stopped and I went, but Mom, he's dead. And she goes, yeah, he knows. And so I'm like, I go, hello. And he goes, I just wanted to wish you good luck tomorrow.
That's
cool.
And
I vividly remember that, and we won the game, and it was fun.
But those little connections are just amazing, right? Like I have those where I wake up and I'm emotional every time it happens. Yeah. Like without fail. Like I'm probably crying, and it's like, but it's like this crazy mix of emotions. Like I'm so happy that I had a chance to interact and talk to him again, but in the same instance, it's like, it's sad, but I don't know. It's hard to describe those feelings. And it's funny how you describe what your grandpa did. That my grandpa's in the minor league Hall of Fame here in town for baseball, like amateur, baseball Hall of Fame, played minor league ball. And I'll never forget my grandpa looking at me after a game when I was probably 12 or 13. It was pretty, close to him passing. He goes, Michael, if I'd ever known hockey could have been this fun, I would have never chased that little white ball around. This guy played at a high level, and his passion was hockey. But when he was growing up in St. Louis in the 20s and 30s, it didn't exist. No. He didn't really have a chance to fulfill that passion until the 50s when he was 30. Yeah, it came very late to him, but when he did, he just jumped right in.
So let me ask this: on that journey, you're stuck there, you probably had the headphones in, but you're stuck with your thoughts? It's
I
like
had no headphones. I rode totally free.
Oh my goodness.
It was just me and the noise, and like
you and your thoughts, very much like being in net during a game. It's just you and your thoughts. How much of that ride was it just you thinking about your grandpa?
Not that much really. Like I think at times it kind of hit me a little bit. There were certain parts of the trail that definitely had strong memories there. I think it was more of almost like a tribute run anything.
Yeah.
Like when you're riding for a grand total of almost 25 or 6 hours, like there's only so many memory lanes you can go down.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of times where I'd pass like Defiance, Missouri, this little town on the trail, and I'd just think, man, we used to always go in there and we would get this drink called a carbo cooler. Like this is the early 90s where we thought carbs were everything, and they were basically like jacked up Gatorades that you could only get at this one store. And we would always stop and get one. And I'm 10, 11 years old. It's the greatest thing in the world. And we'd always stop in Weldon Springs, and that's I stopped and I kind of walked around there for a little while, and those moments were definitely very close to home, very real.
Yeah.
The rest of the trip was just kind of like a winking nod to him in some ways. And also too, like just great for me to go clear my head for a while. I'd lost my job with Vegas. I didn't know what was coming next. And I needed to kind of just chill and do something different. I just didn't expect it to be as painful as it was.
Next time you'll do something like at a beach or,
my ass was bruised for like a week and a half, like for real, like deep bone bruises. And I didn't expect that. I thought I'd have like chafing. I didn't have chafing. I had bone bruises. And,
oh my goodness.
That was tough, but it also was like kind of like the pain of goaltending in some ways. That feeling where you get hit and like, God damn, if it doesn't hurt like crazy when it hits you. And it sucks. And you look at the bruise and you look at what it's done to your body, but like deep down inside, like it makes you feel alive.
Yeah, it was worth it. And it's funny,
crazy to explain that to people, that I miss the pain of goaltending.
Yeah, and those bruises don't show up immediately. It's like 2 or 3 days later when it stops actually hurting, the bruise starts to show, and you're like, yeah, that was a good one.
I took one to the back of the leg in morning skate in Dallas a couple of years ago with Ottawa, and that one was immediate. I can tell you that one. But like
some of them are,
But it really just, it's hard to explain that to people, that you kind of miss the pain of being an athlete, like especially at the pro level, like how often you get that. And I don't know, like I never thought of myself as like a masochist in any way, and I still don't, but there are those times, like, even this past week I skate out and I took a stick right to the nose and I knew I was bleeding right away. And it just, part of me was like, oh, it hurts. And then the other half of me was like,
laughing.
This is hockey,
Yeah. No, it's so funny because you get those bruises or, like you said, stick to the nose, and it's like your initial reaction is like, grunt, but then you just start laughing like, yeah, that's right. That's going to leave a mark. So I want to try and stay on topic and be mindful of time, but I can already see this is gonna be like my discussion with Kelly Rudy, where we just go off on tangents and lose track of time. So I apologize. One of the other things you're big into and is auto racing. And what I find interesting is it's not just auto racing, it's open wheeled racing. And I'm old enough to remember the MTV show Real World, back when it was still real. And I remember in the London cast, there was a fella from St. Louis, also a hockey fan, but he was big into open wheel racing too. What is it about St. Louis and open wheel racing?
Well, you just happen to remember Mike Johnson, who for years owned an indoor karting facility here in St. Louis. My dad raced with his family through SCCA. And I don't know if it's a strong connection, but it's definitely there. I think for my family, it was just that we were, the gear aspect, man, has got to be it. Like, I'm trying to like dance around and give you a really eloquent answer, but I think that like we're creative, and I think that like, especially our era, I don't think it's the same way now with cars. Like everything's very plug and play. It's disposable. When you were into racing as a kid in the 80s, if you grew up in the sport, especially, like you saw, like my mom will tell a story about me using tin snips when I was 3 years old, cutting aluminum for my dad, right? And said, Terry, what are you doing with, let him use those? And like,
they got to learn sometime,
man. Like you grabbed a sheet of aluminum or you grabbed a roll of fiberglass or Kevlar and you laid it up yourself. And like, that was goaltending to us. I'd take my pads, I'd cut them open, I'd take stuffing out, I'd restitch them, I'd use dental floss on them. Like, we just were tinkerers and we had to learn better ways to make things. And nowadays, if you don't like it the way it is, you order it from the shop and it comes that way, you know? Oh, I want my toe to be a little bit different, and Bauer or whoever, they make it for you that way. But like, it was a Wild West back then. And that's the way racing was too. Like, it was so creative. It was aggressive. It was like, I find that there's a big connection there. And the helmet art, like my mask was based off of Jeff Ward Indy Lights racing helmet from the mid 90s. And Jeff Ward came from motorcycles, was a champion there, to Indy Lights, to IRL. Like, so I have that whole lineage. All of my masks, my whole life that got painted were because of a race car driver. And I had that same type of design on every mask.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting you say, our era, because I'm 40, so we're the same vintage, we can say. I remember my high school.
I love I'm looking right now. I love your Cooper hat. I love it.
Yeah, there's a local fella up here, Northern Lids, that makes them and sells them on his website. So since I skate with them, I figured I had to get one. But my high school chemistry teacher, the one day, and this was when cars were starting to go more, like you said, you open the hood and it's just a big plastic covering of everything. He goes, in the 70s, high school kids knew how to work on cars because you popped the hood and you could spot these different things. And he said, asked us all to raise our hand. How many of us knew how to change oil in the car? And maybe half the hands went up at that point in time. And he goes, it's terrible, but I don't blame you guys, because the way they're designing cars, you can't find them. And you were into putting cars together and making them run. My dad was a fireman who taught auto education for the state of Illinois. So he was into taking them apart in very destructive ways. In fact, one of his colleagues at the Illinois Fire Service Institute is from Collinsville, Illinois. And Mr. Bales loved to, when they were all done cutting up the cars, they would find one that was still in somewhat good condition. They'd take all of the windows out. They would cut the roof off, take the doors off, and they'd make sure it was a front wheel drive car. Then they would cut the car in half and he'd drive around the lot. The car's like this, sparking around, and he'd leave the windshield wipers. No windshield, but he'd leave the wipers and have them going. He's driving around the lot with his readers, right on the tip of his nose, just like that. But, as the technology in the cars changed, it was harder for them to teach auto education because they'd go to the junkyard to get these cars and they're all from the 70s. Well, now there's airbags and electronics, the battery's no longer in the front of the car. It's somewhere under a seat. And it's crazy how much things have changed.
It's different. It's just different eras with that. I can still change oil and change brake pads, but am I going to go do a timing belt? No. I'm that's just not the way our lives work any longer.
No.
And that's, in some ways it's sad, but it also speaks to just how well the machinations of society have done. You can get these things fixed very quickly, get your maintenance done very quickly. Does it cost money? Yes, but that makes the economy go in a lot of ways. And it's funny to hear car guys now, like mechanics, they have to know computers just as much as cars. So much of it's plug the chip in and go. And I don't know. I think it just, in a lot of ways, people don't quite understand really the skill level it takes in a lot of jobs, people will think of like he's a mechanic. Like, I think a lot of a mechanic. I think mechanics are very skilled in people, man. Like, if there's anybody that I actually think probably deserves to make some money, like, it's probably a mechanic,
I'm a big fan of Mike Rowe and his push for the trades, because there's a lot of stuff I can do around the house, but with this kitchen remodel we got going on, I probably could have done it, but no, I wanted somebody who is skilled and does this every day to do it, because
you know what? I'm going to give you the best. I'll give you the best example that I have in life. I have a degree in economics from St. Lawrence University. I interned for 3 years with AG Edwards, which turned into Wells Fargo. It's now Wachovia. It's money management. I know how the market works. I could do that, but I don't have the time to invest in the knowledge it takes to be successful at investing at the level I want to.
Right.
So I pay somebody to manage my money. because that person's a professional and they spend their entire day doing it, and they're going to be better at it than I am. And it gives me peace of mind to give it to that person who's not going to half-ass it like I would, because I can't half-ass it. That's why I don't do it. Right. If I'm doing something, it's all in. Yeah. And it's a very goaltending thing. That's why I was driven. That's why I succeeded. That's why I had the success I did. And I know there's people who probably look at my career and go, oh, success. Well, yeah. I mean, I was there. I played 36 games, up for almost 2 years, but I don't need to rattle off my accomplishments. In my heart of hearts, no, I got the most out of the game that I possibly could. And I got to experience some really, really cool and amazing things from it, and how grateful I am for that. But none of that happens if it doesn't come from an internal desire to be the best I could at something, and to not go out there and leave any stone unturned. You just can't half-ass things and get to the top level.
There is a goalie in every beer league locker room that would love to have had your career. There's no way.
It's not lost on me, man. Like, I honestly, like, I kind of have imposter syndrome. Like, I feel like an imposter sometimes. Like, I really do. Like, I'm, like, how did this happen? Right. Like, I'll walk into alumni rooms sometimes and just think, like, did I really do that? Was I really part of that club? And I think part of it is because I never spent a full season in the NHL. I never had a one-way contract. Like, I was always a call-up guy destined to be sent back down. So it always feels like you're on borrowed time when you do that. Mm-hmm. But when you can finally step back from it all and really take it in and realize, and man, it is a special club, and like, the people respect you that have been there and done it. They know, and they know what it's like to grind in the minors like I did as long, like that's not easy to do. And it takes love, but it also takes dedication. And, thankfully in hockey, you can make a really good living in the minors. I'm so happy we're unionized. I'm so happy we have good leadership. We had people that valued the players who would be called up, that they needed to make a living, unlike baseball, where they work for literally half of minimum wage and eat hamburgers and hot dogs and live 15 deep to a house.
Yep.
I'm thankful for what we have in hockey. But it's unique, and we got to keep it that way, because I like to see friends continue to be able to make a good living doing so, whether it's NHL, AHL, Europe, ECHL,
Yeah. So now you had an awesome career, and if it was just you bouncing around, that would have been one thing, not a big deal. But I think one of the things that was really incredible about you, especially late in your career, was how active you are on social media and kind of peeling back that curtain to let us fans really see what it's like to be a pro hockey player. It's not just game day, what we see on the ice. There's a lot more to it. And there's that one post that's just etched in my mind when you got traded and you're saying goodbye to your girls. And that's the part about not just minor league sports, but every level of pro sports that happens. It's at the same time, it's a business. And A, I know it can't be easy. But B, what motivated you to share that part of the game with people?
Just what you said, the reaction you got from it. I wanted people to see that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was vulnerable. That was my two daughters who were almost 3 and 5 years old, crying their eyes out because they haven't seen their dad for 2 months and they have no idea when they're going to see him again.
Yep.
And all we wanted to do that season was take a victory lap and play one more year. I was going to be my last year, I thought, going into it. Mm-hmm. And it just went haywire.
Yeah. And you were all over the place. It was almost like, where's Waldo, but where's Mike now?
Yeah. 5 jerseys, 3 NHL teams in 4 days. And that picture, some people buried me on social media because they saw a BMW in the background and they go, oh, he'll be fine. Look at that car whining about this. And like, first, it wasn't even my car.
Yeah.
I had the 2008 Acura TL sitting right next to it. Okay. 2008. And this was 2018. Mm-hmm. And side note, who gives a shit? My 2 kids are crying their eyes out. Have a little human compassion here, right? Yep. Like this mindset that money fixes everything. There's just as many rich people that kill themselves as poor people.
Yep. Probably more.
And you want that in blunt terms, there it is. And it's money does not fix. And it can sound so bad when you say it, but when somebody says that to me as a pro athlete or to somebody else, oh, shut up, the money, blah money, you're fine, you'll be okay. You can tell that that's a person who's never had money and never will, because they don't appreciate or understand what that's like. And that sounds terrible, but it's like, you'll never be in that position to understand that it doesn't matter at that moment that my kids don't know what to do. Like, showing up, we've been apart for 2 months that year.
Yeah.
You know, Ottawa calls me up. My family's stuck in Belleville, Ontario. My kids are in Canada. I'm American. They're going to school. I hadn't seen them for 2 months. You know, Ottawa didn't follow the CBA. They didn't let me know if I was supposed to get housing or not. Twice blew through things in the CBA. I didn't get any help from the NHLPA on it. And I was stuck in a hotel, like in hockey purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
Am I being sent down? Am I going to be traded? Am I going to be, am I on the team? Am I not on the team? And I never got any answers. And, you know, you're sitting there crying in a hotel room because you just don't know what's going on with your life. And on top of that, you're literally trying to perform in the NHL and play the best you can at the highest stage where you're completely exposed as a goaltender. I mean, I walked into Montreal and played hockey night in Canada. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in the middle of all this, and like mentally what that takes to compartmentalize everything and go through it. It just, you know, man, that was tough. And that's why I think us being more open and sharing things I think it helps people. I do. I think we've been so just so closed off in hockey. Nobody knows anything about our players. Nobody knows anything about Sidney Crosby. Nobody knows anything about Connor McDavid, you know, and I'm not asking for these guys to go out there and put every single little thing that they do in life on social or on blast, but it's like, gosh, you have this chance to make a difference and let people see what it's like and show how like awesome you guys are.
Yeah.
You know, and we just don't.
But how
like,
human you are too. There's
such a fear of looking braggadocious. And that's the hockey culture, is always stay humble. And it's like, no, man, I'm not bragging. Like I'm sharing I like to share this, man. This is special. You know, this is something that I wish people could see, the fun of it, the heartbreak, the agony, the joy. Like there's so much that goes into it. And we just beat that into kids. You know, they're 11 years old wearing suits to the rink. Like, why? There's just no need for that. Let them play, let them have fun. You know, that's all that matters, is that kids go out and they enjoy this sport.
Yeah, you talk about wearing suits to games. When I was in high school, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, played in the Chicago Catholic Hockey League. So it was a league rule that players had to wear a shirt and tie to games, which, okay, fine. That's what we had to wear to school.
Yeah.
Well, my coach, my junior year, decided to take it a step further and told us we had to wear a sweater with our shirt and tie. You know,
wow.
You know, so it's like, okay, cool. Well, my dad was an alum of our high school and still had his Letterman sweater, like Happy Days style Letterman sweater from the 70s.
Like the Fonz, man.
Yeah.
Like,
so I show up to that first game and I have my shirt and tie on with my Letterman sweater from the 70s. And I wasn't a very big guy. My dad had to have been much skinnier than me at that age, which he clearly isn't these days, but he was back then apparently, because this thing was skin tight on me. And I walk in and my coach looks at me and looks at the sweater and he goes, "You're exempt from the rule if you're going to keep wearing that thing." I was like, but I look pretty darn good in this thing.
That's
like,
right.
Come on. And we still have the sweater. My daughter has it in her closet. She likes to wear it every now and then, but it was just funny. But back to, you know, that image you shared with the girls and talking about, you know, people focused on the car and the money part of it. They clearly didn't have kids, because any parent sees that picture and they could feel that emotion and that heartbreak. It wasn't about the money at that point. It was about that connection with your kids.
The amazing thing is when you get comments from people who clearly do have kids.
Yeah.
And I worry about them. I worry about their families. I'm not perfect. Our family's not perfect. No kids. Like, it's just, life's a struggle in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If anybody thinks that they've got a perfect family, like, we're all dreaming, right?
Yeah.
We're all lying to ourselves. We
Yeah.
all have struggles. And I just can't believe it when somebody will put you on blast and then you see the picture of them with their kid.
Yeah.
And then it's typically a tweet about how their kid's, the best hitter they've ever seen at 6 years old. And it's like, okay, this all makes sense. Like you've got this inflated version of yourself and your reality. And, it's kind of just the nature of pro sports. People want to live vicariously through those who are doing it. Right? They just want to be in the action. They want to feel part of it. It's why they say like, we didn't play well tonight. Or like a fan, well, are you on the team?
Yeah.
And that'll blow them up, right? Like, well, we didn't play well tonight. Like, oh, I didn't know you took a shift in this period, And like, I'll say that jokingly because I truly understand that feeling of like you play for a city when you play a pro sport. You wear it on your chest. You wear it for the Chicago Blackhawks, the St. Louis Blues. Like you are playing for that city.
Yep.
I understand it when people say we didn't play well because they feel part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of sports.
Yeah.
But it does always strike you a little funny when you've actually been on the ice or on the field when somebody says we didn't play well. And it's like, oh, that's nice. You can say that. I played my ass off. I know it didn't go great while you watched me and drank 6 Busch Light. You know what I mean? But
it's funny you say it 'cause my son's a baseball player and we'll get home from games and my wife will be like, well, how did the game go? And I'll be like, well, and she's like, oh, how many hits did you have at the game? And it's like
she gives it to you. That's funny.
She gives it to me. It's funny because I almost think like the way, I am with my kids. I'm very hands off. Like, hey, you go out there and have fun. Like you had tryouts this past weekend. And it's like, don't look at tryouts. It's evaluations. They're just trying to find the right spot to put you to succeed. It's like, oh, okay. But it's like, as a parent, every pitch, I feel I'm more anxious than he is in the game. So I was like, yeah, I can say we because I went through the same emotions as he did.
Well, you take ownership of it in a lot of ways, right? I mean, they are your children, they're your offspring. Like you love them dearly, and you just want to see them enjoy it.
Yeah, and
like
he's 13, he's a better ball player than I ever was.
I mean, one of the coolest things ever was last year. I wasn't there for it, which crushes me. I was out in Vegas doing my thing, working with the Golden Knights, and I get the video of my daughter from my wife, and my daughter scored the game-winning shootout goal in this tournament. She's a mite. It's house league. It's 8U. And I don't know if she'd scored a goal all year. And she goes down, hardly stick handles the thing, and just buries 5-hole in this kid. And like, I was emotionally overwhelmed. Yeah. Not because they won or anything else. It was just because of her reaction. Yeah. She didn't know what the hell to do. She didn't know how to celebrate. She watches hockey. She doesn't watch celebrations. She didn't know what to do. She put her hand in the air and I could see the smile on her face and her teammates, the way they celebrated. But it just, when you're a father, when you're a parent and you see your child organically building a love for something and their happiness, and like, that might've been the happiest moment of her life at that point. Yep. And that to me, that meant more than anything. I could care less that it happened on her scoring a goal. It was cool that it was, but just that smile, man. And that's just try to tell people all the time. I got to help coach that team for half the season. I just told the parents from the start, let them have fun. This is what matters. It's 8U. It doesn't even matter if it's 13, Bantams, Pee-wees. They need to be having fun. Yeah. It's funny how much better players play too when you just tell them have fun. 100%. Look at Marty Brodeur. Yeah. When the whistle would blow and he'd look at the ref and give him that smile after a big save. Yeah. Or the cockiness that Patrick Waugh had when he'd get on the stage after winning and, tell JR he couldn't hear him because he had a Stanley Cup ring plug in his ear. Yeah. Like when you'd see these glimmers and these wry smiles and when you see that joy come through in NHL players and goalies, and like Marty Brodeur for me was just the best about that. And part of the reason why I don't know if I want to say idolized, but looked up to him so much because I just see him be lights out focused, make these unbelievable reads in a game, make the save, and the ref comes over and he's smiling and laughing. Yeah. And I see it in Marc-Andre Fleury today. And I see it, and you see it in other goaltenders, but like, that's what it should be. And that's why they're successful people, because everything that they do is geared toward making sure that it's not just serious business. It's still a level of enthusiasm and joy that you can't find outside of the sport.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned Fleury because he's on my list to talk about here. But the Angola guys even mentioned, how much fun he has playing the game. That it's obvious, and fans pick up on that, and that's why he became a fan favorite in Vegas because it was infectious, his love for the game, and I'm excited to see that in Chicago. But I want to ask you, as a Blackhawks fan, what does that do to the Blackhawks team, bringing in the reigning Vezina Trophy winner? They were a borderline playoff team, made a few moves, but bringing in a guy like him for the season. But then you also have this nice young crop of goaltenders and Delia and Lincoln and his old buddy Subban over there. What do you think of that move?
Well, I think it gives them some legitimacy in the locker room to start the season. Mm-hmm. And I said this last year, and I said it on record, that if you were Jonathan Taves, and he didn't end up playing, but if you're Patrick Kane and you're looking around and you're looking and seeing Colin Delia and Malcolm Subban are your goaltenders, mm-hmm. you're going, I don't know what we have. Right. And that's not to slag on those guys at all. That's a real assessment. Mm-hmm. You don't have a Robin Leonard. You don't have Corey Crawford anymore. You don't have somebody who's won at that level.
Right.
And you got a lot of hope, and you got guys that you like and are good people, and damned if they don't work their ass off, but you just don't know.
Right.
And, I think all of us in the goalie world were rooting for Colin Delia or Malcolm Subban to come in and just crush it last year and finally break out and get that. And, Lankinen comes in, and man, he was a breath of fresh air, but it took a while for that to really go.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing is, like, right from the start now, there's expectations that, hey, we're going to get good goaltending from the beginning. And, I think for, bringing Marc-Andre in, I just think there's such an X factor to him that you've already discussed.
Yep.
It's not just your job as a goaltender to stop the puck. You have to inspire your teammates. And nobody does that more than Mark. I've talked to so many players in and out of the Vegas locker room, out of the Pittsburgh locker room when he was there, and they all said to a man, they all want to play for him. They want to see him win. They want to be by his side when they do that. And I think that matters. I really do. And, I think it's, the Blackhawks they have kinks to work out for sure. But I do think from the start of the season, there's legitimacy in the net to start the year instead of question marks.
They're, even without the Seth Jones move, and some of the other ones, they're a markedly better team simply with that one move. And I mean, the way they pulled it off, literally traded him for nothing.
Well, and hey, let's be very clear. Chicago needs a good story right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's
like they very badly need somebody to turn the tide of negative publicity. And if there's anybody that can do that, it's Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah. As a Blackhawk fan, it's very disheartening.
Yep.
News as it comes out. One thing we've learned about Marc-Andre Fleury too from the Spit and Chicklets boys is he's quite the prankster too. So that should bring some lighthearted feelings into the locker room. It'd be funny when he starts pulling them on Johnny Taves and Patrick Kane.
He was my first NHL start was against Marc-Andre.
Oh, really?
It was in the Igloo. Yeah. And that was fun. I showed him the game sheet a couple of years ago when I got the gig with Vegas as their TV analyst. The first year when I was there 2 years ago, there was no COVID restrictions. So you go in the locker room, you'd see everybody. And like Flower and I would just end up talking shop for 20 minutes every day. Cause I was in the league the year before.
Yeah.
Like it was just two old goalies hanging out.
Yeah.
And I showed him the game sheet and he was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like, it's like, yeah, dude, like, you won. I didn't win that, but it was kind of fun to walk down that memory lane with him.
Well, and it's funny because you talk, two old goalies, played against each other. I've learned doing this podcast, having goalies literally from the Bantam level through to NHL Hall of Famers and Eddie Belfour. It doesn't matter what level you played with. Once you find that other goalie in the room, your night's sealed. That's who you're talking to the rest of the day. My
favorite one was the ECHL All-Star game in 2007, of all things, because it's kind of like the quintessential goalie story.
Yeah.
And, I really got along with my goalie partners. I can only think of one of them I really just didn't enjoy. And they should be your closest confidant in the room. They're your number one competitor, but it's not up to you who plays. And the coaches decide that,
Yep.
whatever. But I remember this 2007 All-Star game because it was myself, Devin Dubnyk, Adam Burkle, Cedric Desjardins, David Shantz, and I can't remember the other, but like, you know, Dubnyk and I we went all night.
Yeah.
And Desjardins was with us. And it was like, literally, it got to be, you know, one or two. Oh, here comes the goalie union. Like literally everywhere we went in Boise, Idaho was just like the goalies.
Yeah.
And none of us knew each other from anything that before, but it was, you know, you just automatically gravitate towards each other. And like, that was always a really cool moment, you know, like years later when Dubnyk and I were in Arizona for training camp, we laughed about it, like how it was right at the start of our careers. And, you know, a decade later, here we are again.
Yeah, it's crazy how goalies just find each other. My brother-in-law, you know, got married a couple weeks ago, and we're at the reception, and this guy comes walking up to me, and my brother-in-law introduces me, and he didn't look like he'd be a hockey fan at all. You find out he's a chef, and it's like, oh, cool, and we're talking, and then my brother-in-law just drops. He's like, hey, and you know, just so you know, Joe's a goalie and he's got his own podcast. And this guy's like, you're a goalie? I am too. And like, it was boom, rest of the night, we're just sitting in the corner with our beers. Talking
it's funny because like here in St. Louis, I know 3 chefs that are goalies or former goalies. And it all relates back to being creative. Like we talked about racing. It's the same thing, man. You work with your hands, you're creative. Like goalies are the art kids of the hockey world.
Mm-hmm.
We sit there, we design masks. It all goes together.
When I had Eddie and Dane Belfour on, we were talking, you know, and I let them know I'm a home brewer. You know, I'm not doing whiskey because we all know that's highly illegal at home. And when I said that, Dane just started laughing. But I'm a home brewer. And they said the same thing. There's just something about goalies. We're the creative kind. So yeah, you are right. But I like that you mentioned the chef part of it because you're very much into food. You are a foodie. You know, anybody that follows you on Instagram, there's all this other stuff, but you're using Instagram for its original intended purposes and sharing your food, but it's the preparation. How did you get so into cooking, and not just cooking, but like the gourmet side of it? You're not just making, you know, your regular stuff. You're kind of like Remy from Ratatouille over there making some good stuff.
Well, you know what? I almost take exception to foodie because I don't like adult Lunchables very much. I'm not a charcuterie fan. And it's like, that's an automatic disqualifier to being a foodie. But I think for me, it just started because like the pro hockey lifestyle, you go to the rink in the morning, you get home a little after lunchtime, 1 or 2 o'clock, and you got time on your hands and you got to cook dinner. And me being a type A personality, I was just like, well, okay, I'm going to start cooking. And that's what I did. And it started out really rudimentary, basic stuff, just, you know, chicken and pasta and vegetable, all the things that you were always told as a kid that you should eat, which I found out later on was just trash. Chicken breasts, I can't even eat them. They're so flavorless now, like dry. And then, you know, pasta's terrible for you. Damn, it doesn't taste amazing, but it's so bad for you. Right. So that's like a special occasion thing for me now, but I had all this time and I thought, okay, I'm actually starting to enjoy this. My mom always cooked and I'm so thankful that she did, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that she was Julia Child, but my mom made stuff that tasted good. I liked eating my mom's cooking and she made it. And that was important to me. And I wanted to do the same thing. And now I want that for my kids too. But I started to watch Top Chef on Bravo. My wife and I did together. And we got way into it. And, you know, that kind of coincided with getting a subscription to Food and Wine magazine. Yeah. And just trying things. You know, and man, there were some absolute disasters I've done. I still screw things up and it drives me up the wall, but you got to be willing to try. You got to learn. And I don't know, to me, like, I'm not an artist. I'm not an artistic person. I can't paint. I don't have that type of eye. Like I have an aesthetic eye, but I couldn't tell you a Monet from a Picasso. Let's put it that way. But to me, like food on a plate that's art to me. Like when you make it, I want it to be pretty. I want my food to be pretty, straight up. Like it needs herbs, it needs color contrast, the flavors, salt, acid, fat, heat. Like it needs all these different components. Like I just loved it, man. I found it was something that I could feel myself getting better at. I learned how to you can never learn enough with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that fits very much into a goaltender's mindset.
Yeah.
You're always evolving. You're always learning new techniques. You're always looking for the young guys to show the old guys the way when you get older. And it's the same way with cooking. And, for all the old standbys, there's always a new riff on it, and you learn how to do things, and you figure out, okay, like, I don't have capers, I'm going to toss a little fish sauce in this. And like, I fell in love with it, and it tastes good. So it's like, it's a double whammy for me that it checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah. And what I love is whenever you're grilling, you always show your grill, which you retrofitted with a couple hockey sticks.
I did. It's highly customized.
Yeah. But like, for somebody who loves food as much as you, I think we're all expecting you to have, like one of the green eggs, or like, I just got one of those Pit Boss pellet smokers, but you still have, the old school,
Yep.
little old grill that,
pellet grills are for posers, man.
Hey, no. I'm still learning, but as we've done this kitchen renovation, it's been amazing.
Listen, those pellet smokers and grills,
yeah,
in all honesty, they are fantastic for what they do, and especially as a gateway into doing smoking and other things. I jokingly say that when I say they're for posers, because it's like you toss it in, you turn the button to 225 and you see it 6 hours later, but I love the live fire aspect. I love the challenge of it. I love the different smokes and flavors that I can play with. And like, frankly, it's not easy. I don't like easy things, but when you get to the point that you really start nailing it, it's really like rewarding, man. Like, when people come over and they're like, man, these ribs are good. I'm like, I know, like, that's when you get to the point it's cool. But yeah, it is. It's a PK grill. It's super old school. But realistically, it matters who's doing the cooking, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if I didn't have a PK, I'd probably have a big Weber kettle. Like, those big ceramic green eggs, those are awesome. Like, it's all about what you're using and working with. But my PK is cool, man. It retains heat really well. It's great for smoking, and my kids love it because it's kind of low, and they get to like paint the ribs, they call it, when they put the sauce on them.
Well, you hit the nail on the head perfectly. It doesn't matter what you're using. It matters who's using it. It's just like goalie equipment. I remember, growing up, you'd see the kid come out with the brand new stuff, and it's like not a puck mark on his equipment. You're like, oh, this kid's going to suck. Doesn't matter that he's got the new stuff, and it's like in the beer leagues now, I've got 21-year-old Vaughn Legacies, and I walk out and guys are like, oh, we got a night ahead of us. You don't wear that stuff and not be, somewhat decent for the beer leagues, which I didn't live up to that last night in our season opener, but luckily my team pulled it out. We were down 6-3 with 10 minutes left, and they decided they had worked off their pregame parking lot beers and put 4 on the board to come away with the win.
It's funny about equipment because I wore Bauer my entire career.
Yeah.
And Bauer was so good to me. It was a two-way street, right? Yeah. Like, I never asked for an endorsement deal from them. They did, frankly, they gave me endorsement. Mm-hmm. I never negotiated it once. And I used their gear from when I was 15 years old. Simple as that.
And print? I loved it.
Yeah. But you know what? Pretty much every company makes really good equipment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you shouldn't just wear a brand because your favorite goalie does. You should wear what you think works best. And that's why I always tell people, and kids especially, to try different gear. How do I do that? Well, go ask the kid that's on the sheet with you.
Yeah.
If you can borrow his gear, trade gear for practice. Like, when I was in Peoria, Jake Allen and I traded goalie pads for practice. He wore my Bauers. I wore his Vaughns.
Yeah.
And I liked my Bauers better. He liked his Vaughns better, but we tried them.
Yeah, we did that in goalie camps, and in college, teammates got different stuff. It's like, I got to take these out for a spin,
For sure, man. And I always tell that to people, like Landon Bow, who I played with in the Texas and Dallas's organization. I said, man, like, you're young, you should try every company this summer. I said, they'll send you gear. Like, try everybody. And sometimes there's a hesitancy, right? Like, oh, I don't want to, make them feel. I'm like, no, dude, they will send you a set of gear. Take advantage of this because it's your livelihood. You need to play with whatever makes you feel best.
Yeah. And our mutual friend Goalie Gear Nerd, I asked him that question flat out, who makes the best equipment? He said, everybody does. Yep. it's what's best for you and the way you play. And yeah, I've got 21-year-old equipment, but finally placed an order for new stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow will be 11 weeks since I ordered it. And I ordered new Vaughns, got some V9s. And, but I would go to the Let's Play Hockey Expo every year and check out all of the equipment. And it was what worked best for my style of play. And I like the older, softer pad. Back when we were in high school, all pads were soft. So that's what I got used to, like the CCM Access line. I could never, to me, that's a 2x4 at my leg. Right. So it's like I needed something softer and,
And I came to love stiff pads, like
right.
I started the same way, soft, and I ended up loving them stiff, midway through my career.
If I got new pads as often as you did, I probably would too. But like you said, I bought mine in 1999. Me and my son had the realization yesterday when we were talking about my new equipment that I've had my pads longer than I've known my wife. So, yeah, he thought
it's a long relationship with the two.
Yeah, he thought that was pretty funny. And I met my wife like right after I got these things. So there was that part to it. So I'm not going to keep you much longer. I finish each episode with a list of 10 rapid fire questions. But before I get to them, I got an important question for you. Of the cities you played in and visited as a goalie, what were the most under the radar, awesome food cities?
Oh, cool. Good question. Really good question. Oh, man. St. John's, Newfoundland there were a couple spots there that I would just love to show up at in town. And Raymond's Merchant Tavern, that place was so good. And you're almost inspiring me to go through my big list of cities that I played in. I think everybody knows that Austin has a good food scene. I was lucky enough to play in Portland, Maine, and I think I don't think people know. Portland, Maine might be the best food scene in the nation.
Really?
Yeah. I don't say that lightly. It's incredible. And I mean, St. John's, Portland, those places were so good. And so many different varieties of things that were offered. Boy, it's tough when you start thinking of you start trying to think of now where you've had great dishes. And I found a place in St. Paul's named Octo that was just so good, but it was kind of like one city. And Minneapolis, I didn't get a chance to go as many places I wanted. And I think Portland's got to be the answer, just because, I had so much familiarity to it, but every single player that when they came in and I took them somewhere beyond just your, let's be like the lobster rolls there are unbelievable. Everybody knows about them. But when you take them outside of that to the other places and they all go, wow, I didn't know this was here. It takes a cake.
Well, it's like being from Chicago. When I'm in town with people that aren't from Chicago, they're like, oh, I want to go to Giordano's and get deep dish pizza. And I'm like, no.
First of all, that in the freezer aisle if you want anywhere in the US.
It's like, we'll get deep dish while we're here, but it won't be from Giordano's. But we're not getting deep dish. Because in Chicago, deep dish is special occasion pizza. It's not everyday pizza. I said
it's the thin and crispy in Chicago.
Yeah, pub style. And it's like, so that's what we're going to get. And I would always take them to Vito and Nick's on the South Side. Dave Portnoy finally went there. It is, in my opinion, the best pizza in the world. But it's like, there's the places the locals go. And then there's the places the tourists go. So whenever, people I know are heading to Chicago, they're always like, all right, where should we go eat? And unfortunately, it's over half my life ago now. So I'm like, I could give you places, but I don't even know if they're still around.
Well, the nice part is when you can find the balance, when you find a place that's still like a touristy spot that everybody knows about, but is still like banging good food.
Yeah.
That's when you've really found your wheelhouse. And where I'm from here in St. Louis, we've got a couple of those legacy restaurants that they still kick ass. And going to Ted Drew's for frozen custard is just like a no-brainer. It is absolutely as good as people remember and think, like those types of places.
Yeah, Rainbow Cone for us is the ice cream place. Yeah. Now it's my dad was a fireman, so he got some good food recommendations over the years, and he was on the hazmat unit for I think it was 7-8 years, and they were citywide. So we had some good food there. I always remember the one time we were down at Maxwell Street back when it was like Maxwell Street from the Blues Brothers when they went there.
One of my favorite movies ever. Jake and Elwood.
Yes. I could go on and on days about that movie.
2 whole fried chickens and dry white toast. Jake Elwood.
But we're sitting there and we're eating some good Maxwell Street Polish sausages, and we're sitting on the rig, and I go, Dad, look at the size of that cat. And this thing was this big. And he looks at it and he goes, there's no hair on that tail. That's no cat. Hurry up, close the doors. We're getting out of here. But yeah, he always had some good places. When we had people come to visit, it was like, where do you find these places? He goes, so-and-so over at Engine 98's house. Or, they told me about it. And yeah,
they've got their own subculture of food with, firehouse cooking there. And it's pretty cool. I've had a couple of friends that are firefighters, and they, it's his duty for the week or whatever. Like that's a pretty cool group of camaraderie.
Yeah. So mom could cook, but she cooked out of necessity, not because she enjoyed it. Dad was the cook in the house. The problem is he learned how to cook at the firehouse. So he didn't know how to cook for 4 of us. And he would
cook
make
in moderation.
Yeah, he would make enough spaghetti noodles for 3 of us, but enough sauce for 8 of us. And finally one day I looked at him and was like, Dad, the war is over. You can stop rationing the noodles. And I thought my sister was going to pee herself, and he just looked at me like, you SOB. Like, if you don't like it. But I went to the firehouse every chance I got growing up with them. And the food was unreal. I remember one day, Engine 103, it's basically right across the street from Johnny's Ice House, 3 blocks from the United Center. And his cook was just phenomenal. And he made this, we'll call it like a jambalaya, but we're like, man, Larry, this is amazing. You need to make this again. He goes, I'm not going to be able to do that. And we go, why not? He goes, I just took all the leftovers in the fridge and threw it together. I don't know what's in there. And we're like, this is unreal. But so I don't want to keep you much longer because we've been going for a while. And I know we could probably just keep talking because we haven't even touched on equipment. And
we can always do it again and talk goalie gear. That'll take forever.
We might have to, we might just have to do that and bring, make it a deal where we bring goalie gear nerd on too. So I have these rapid fire questions. I ask the same questions of everybody. The first one is, what's the craziest coaching moment from your playing days?
Oh,
I figure you probably got a few to choose from.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Best ofs are always hard because it's such a long career. Oh man. Some of the coast with Glenn Gullitson when he threw a trash can. Probably Coach Joe Marsh at St. Lawrence University. We kicked over a Gatorade cooler and I got my first win. That's just a memorable one. We were playing in Providence and he started tomahawking the cooler with an old Sherwood and the blade wouldn't break off. And he finally just like super kicked the Gatorade cooler. It was orange Gatorade all over the locker room, staining the bags. And we were losing like 3-1 going into the third and we won 4-3 in overtime. That was a good one. We had a coach named Dave Allison in Peoria who came into the room singing Christmas carols directly before Christmas, and everybody joined him in a bar of Come All Ye Faithful. We Alley Cat walked in one time like a Southern General. We were playing Grand Rapids that night. Fellas, we are going to be winners and grinners. We are going to beat the Grand Rapids Griffins. And he went for like 5 minutes in tone, in character. We got the shit kicked out of us that night. But yeah, Dave Allison was up there. Joe Marsh. Those are, I'd have to really think for the craziest, but those are some tip of the iceberg ones.
You talk about, singing. It was my freshman year. I got a concussion and I was a 4-year JV All-Star. Because like you said, sometimes just when you come in, there's somebody above you. And so I was a JV All-Star. I loved every minute of it. We had like an 11 o'clock Saturday morning game and I get a concussion. I finished the game, played 7 minutes, holding on to the crossbar, making saves, didn't let it go in.
Yeah.
So they're checking me out and they're asking me, "Got anybody watch you?" I'm like, "I don't know, probably." And the coach is like, "Come on, you're coming with us." Or no, I'm sorry. That was a different game. I was keeping stats at a varsity game, and we're in St. Peter, Minnesota, at St. Olaf, and Eric Richardson, our only Jewish player on the team, gets the win that night, and it happens to be the start of Hanukkah. So he gets on the bus singing the dreidel song, and he's teaching the team how to sing the dreidel song. So by the time we got to campus, all of these, Catholic kids are singing the dreidel song with Richie.
That sounds like a very Mitch Korn moment.
Yeah.
If you ever got a chance to meet Mitch or a Mitch Korn goalie school, it's Mitch, of course, is Jewish, and he loves to play off of that. And it's my best friend at school, Mike Zabricker, as well. Like it's so funny when people have a different unique background or culture can kind of get everybody to chime in and join with them, and like those organic moments where everybody's just rising, having a blast, right?
Yeah, I remember in high school we had a Jewish kid on the team. Odelson was his last name, and it's a Catholic school, so we're taking religion class every day. And one day, one of my teammates, he's just interested about the Jewish faith, and he's asking all these questions. And finally, he stops and looks at him. He goes, "You realize it's the first part of the Bible is my entire religion. Like, you should know this stuff." And at that, the whole locker room just lost it. Like, yep, you've got a really good point there. He's like, you should know this stuff. This is nothing new to you. He's like, my God, spiteful, yours is loving. But yeah, it was one of those. So the next question, what's your favorite all-time goalie mask?
Potvin.
I was guessing that was the response based on your earlier.
Listen, all those old school guys, all those old Greg Harrison masks, I could go down the list, but that original cat mask for Felix Potvin to me is just everything about it. The shape of the mask, how the design flowed through it, his nickname, how it fit the colors and the motif of the Leafs, and his gear. Like, I don't think you can touch that.
And how it adapted to the other teams that he played for too.
And that inspired me. My design went from team to team.
Mm-hmm.
I just changed the colors, the logos on the side. It was primarily the same design especially on the forehead and on the sides.
So the next one is, and you've played at a few. So what's your favorite rink that you've played at?
In the NHL, it was in Montreal. In the American League, it was Syracuse. And Montreal is just because it just had a vibe to it, man. Like, you skate out there and it's got this hum to it you can't really define. And it's people talking hockey, watching hockey. It's got an aura. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, man. And getting to play in that, and like the way that they organically cheer as the play happens when they should be cheering, and it builds to these natural crescendos, and it ebbs and flows, and it's just very, very cool to play in Montreal. And then Syracuse is just a shit box, and I always played well there. And I don't know, man, the fans are right on top of you. There was just something about that place that I just loved it.
That might have to be the clip right there for my teaser. Syracuse is a shit box.
But you got to make sure you say, like, I loved playing there. That's the thing. Like, but it was, man. Like, I have this thing for old rundown buildings, and they've done everything they can to upgrade it and make it nice now. Yeah. But it's old, man. It's got, fans blowing on the American flags in warm-ups. I love those old buildings. Like, the United Center is an awesome building, but I miss the old Chicago Stadium and just what that was. You're walking to your seat and your feet are sticking to the floor because of the spilt beer from decades. Like you said, the fights happening in the stands. There's just something to those old buildings. And I get that. So this is always a fun one to ask people. What's your favorite stick that you've ever used? Oh, I tell you, the Bauer Supreme 2S's I had at the end of my career were probably the best performing sticks, the lightest, the thinnest. I could never get the flex right on those, though. I still had been trying to convince Bauer to make them more and more flexible. They were still stiff. And a lot of times people didn't realize that goalie sticks need to flex just like a player stick. So I could still shoot with them. I loved them. Don't get me wrong. But I think the best sticks I ever had were Sherwood PMP 9950, the wood ones, not the foam course, the wood ones from when I was first year junior, when I was 17 years old, second year junior. I could launch the puck with those things. Now, I mean, 4 out of every 12 were really good ones out of the batch, but I could fire it. I scored a goal with one of them. I was the first goalie to score in the North American League. That was like my claim to fame. And I loved those sticks. Still to this day, I love them. They were the perfect flex. They were thin. Oh God, man, that was the best stick ever made for me.
I knew a lot of goalies that use those sticks, and it's funny you mentioned the North American League. They have their showcase at the Super Rink this coming weekend, and I'm going to be going to check it out because Ev from Vaughn sent me a text saying, "Hey, you want to get together while I'm in town?" And I'm going, "Well, I've got my pads ordered through you guys. It's been 11 weeks. Maybe I'll get lucky and he wants to meet because he's bringing them with him." I doubt it, but I'm secretly hoping that's why. If not, I'm still having a beer with him.
That'd be a nice present.
Yeah.
It's good to be friends with gear reps.
Yeah. Well, and that's a funny one. Like, I didn't know Ev before this other than listening to his podcast, but one of my college teammates runs a goalie school here in the Twin Cities, Devon Air Goaltending, and he's gotten some sweet Vaughn pads over the years. So he said, "Hey, I need the number to your rep. I'm going to place an order." So he gave me the number, and once we placed the order, Ev starts texting me like, "Hey," because I'm getting custom graphic too. Like, I've waited 21 years. I'm not going with your stock graphic. And so he starts texting me like right away, like, we got to make sure this is right and everything else. So I don't know. It's almost feeling like Ev and I are friends now because of this. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. It's Christmas Day for me later this week. So the next question, what is your favorite youth hockey memory?
Oh boy, that's really tough. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, like AAA is still youth hockey. We won the Kamloops International Bantam Ice Hockey Tournament when I was 15 in Bantams. And our head coach was Lindsay Middlebrook, who's the man who taught me how to play goal. Mm-hmm. And goaltending in St. Louis wouldn't be anywhere without Lindsay Middlebrook. Mm-hmm. Played in the NHL, played for St. Louis University when it was a Division I program. Lindsay started the first goalie school in St. Louis that was native to the area. Lindsay taught me all the basics, and he was our coach. And damned if we didn't walk up to Canada and Kamloops and win this thing. And we had no hope going in. People didn't think we were going to win. And we're one of 4 American teams there, and we took it. We beat Honeybake in the final, and it was crazy. Like, we got rings. Yeah, like there were fans. Like, we saw a Kamloops Blazer game that night. Like, it was crazy, man. And I gotta tell you, that was pretty unbelievable. I'd say a close second to that would be going to the Pee Wee Quebec tournament a couple of years before that. That was kind of like my first taste of what it was like to go to Canada. Yeah, French speaking culture, like the whole mystique of it, especially being from a place like St. Louis. My grandpa told me they wouldn't feed me if I couldn't speak French. So he's lying to me. Yeah. But yeah, Kamloops, what we accomplished, and especially with Lindsay, who just, man, that guy means a lot to me.
Yeah. And just knowing a few people from the St. Louis area that played hockey, that are our age, he has a big impact on St. Louis hockey and where it's at today.
Huge, not just goalies, but the number of players that he coached that went on to Division I schools, to major junior, to pro. Yep. He's left a huge footprint in the city.
Absolutely. So next question, what's the best chirp you've heard on the ice, off the ice, directed at you, not directed at you, from you?
I don't know. I can always think of my favorite one was from juniors, and it was so simple, but I'd never heard it until that point. And one of our guys had on a full bubble, and somebody looked at me. He's yelling at the other guy on the team. He's like, I can't hear you. Roll your window down. And for some reason, that's always stuck with me. I had never heard it. And at the time, I thought that was the funniest thing. But I remember once playing against Utica, and a player, this was late in my career, I'm 35 or something. And this guy who was probably 20 years old and was down from the Canucks. I'm not going to say who it was. But he's down from the Canucks because he should have been down. Mm-hmm. Really early draft pick who was not playing well. And guy chirps me as I'm skating by him. And I hadn't done anything. And I looked at this guy like, I never chirped anybody, rarely, unless they did it first. And I go, yeah, you can call me whatever you want, but you're a 20-year-old has-been, dude. And I just, I ended up being teammates with him. I don't know if he remembered that. But I just remembered that being like, what? Like, why are you doing this? You're 20, man. Like, and you're not in the position where you should be chirping people here. And his career hasn't been too smooth. I know he's trying to get it to rebound now. I hope it does, but that one kind of stuck out of my head as just like weird,
I liked when I asked David Hutchins that question. He said his son's goalie coach at one of the camps looked at him and said, "You must be really good at dodgeball."
I used to use that at goalie camp. You've hit everything but the scoreboard on this ice. When you put the cones out, they just run the cones over. It's the same line it's actually the line from Days of Thunder that you've run into everything but this Goodyear blimp. And we don't have blimps at hockey games. So
no.
Interchangeably.
No, although I'm surprised we haven't had them at some of the outdoor games. But my son, we're driving to the state baseball tournament this year, and the 3M Golf Classic was going on. So we drive by this one little regional airport, and there's the Goodyear blimp moored waiting. Well, they took off, and my son's like, "Oh, I wonder why they're here." It's like, "Well, they're coming to fly over your baseball games." So he's like, "They are?" I was like, "No, there's a big golf tournament right down the road." Knucklehead. He's like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But he thought, they're coming for some 13U baseball state tournament. It's like,
kids will believe anything.
Yeah. So this is a question I always like to ask people. What's the worst post-game beer you've had?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't really. First off, I'm not like a beer guy at all. There are times where a cold beer is great. Shower beer, after cutting the lawn, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
The worst. I mean, probably throw it back to college and like Milwaukee's Best Light or something, like Beast Light or some just trash like that. That would definitely fit the bill, because I would never slag on anything Busch or like the Bavarian is always in my wheelhouse with Busch Light. But Beast was bad. Natty Light, like just all those cheap college ones were not my thing. I don't like Bud Light. Bud Light's give me a Busch Light any day.
I had some friends that would get Schlitz because you could get a 30-pack for $3.99 in college, and it's like, there's a reason they're $3.99, guys.
Not the best.
So when you tape your stick, do you go heel to toe or toe to heel?
Oh, heel to toe, of course. You're probably a sociopath if you go toe to heel.
You're the second person to say that. Very few that I've talked to said they go toe to heel. Now, Connor Beaupre, the wild e-bug, says he goes toe to heel because he really likes to play the puck, and he just feels the puck comes off better that way. And I'm like, hey, I trust you because I can't play the puck.
Yeah. Oh, Connor's an awesome dude, and so is his dad, Don.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I always went heel to toe. That's just the tradition. I don't care. It doesn't matter how you tape your stick. Just don't make it a big ugly mess, and make sure you tape it regularly. Don't put more tape over the next layer of tape.
Absolutely. So I know this one because I've listened to your podcast and some of the other stuff you've been on, but some of my listeners maybe haven't. What's your favorite number to wear and why?
56. And I wore it because it was my dad's racing number on his cars, and my grandpa adopted 56 later in life to be his hockey number. So my second year pro in Vegas, it dawned on me. I had a revelation that, you know what? 29's been worn by a lot of goalies.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to try out 56. And I figured I was in Vegas, they'll let me get away with it. And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so if you ever saw me not wearing 56, it's because the team didn't give me a choice.
Yep.
Or in the Dallas organization, they were going to retire it for Sergei Zubov. So that was the only one of those I ran into. In Ottawa, Magnus Payarvi was wearing 56. So aside from that, the only times I didn't get to was when teams had team orders.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So the last question is my favorite one to ask. What advice do you have for young goaltenders?
Have fun. It's the first and foremost, the most important thing is to have fun. Beyond having fun, because it's simple to say that, it's an oversimplification.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be an amazing skater. And we're not talking about skating to the blue line and back as fast as you can. We're not talking about crossing over. We're talking about being a goalie skater.
Yeah.
Starts, stops, crisp, precise, sharp skates. No goalie on earth should have a skate sharpening over a half inch. I don't care what your age is. 5/8, no. Half inch or sharper, period. I don't know if that's going to resonate with people. I'm sure I'm going to get hate tweets for that. But you can't play goalie without having skates that make you stop so that your feet are square and you're not drifting. Mm-hmm. I think it's critical. And I also think the more I watch for young goaltenders, I think don't leave the blue paint. Stay home. I think there's so many coaches will tell goalies and they don't know better. Like, oh, you're a small goalie. You need to play outside the crease. And they have no idea where they are in the angle. They lose track of the net. They have to work twice as hard to go twice the distance to be off angle. But I think really have fun and be a great skater. Find somebody who knows what they're doing as a goalie skater and just hammer on it. Learn how to use those edges.
I like that you mentioned, stay in the blue paint. My goalie coach, Darren McCluskey was his name in youth hockey. He was very much, beyond the red line of the goal crease. That's where you should always be. And then I started, one year for Christmas, I got the Stefan Popa goaltending manuals, and his whole thing, it was, the horseshoe, and he would call out the numbers and you had to close your eyes and visualize where he'd be on the horseshoe. And then it was shortly after they came out with the loaf of bread goal crease, which was almost like the horseshoe. It's like, I love the loaf of bread. And I still, when I get to a rink, look at what kind of crease do they have? Do they have, the half circle still? I hate those rinks that have the half circle, or do they have the loaf of bread? And because I just feel my angles are better on those loaves of bread. Yeah. So, well, before we end, where can folks find you on social media? If they haven't found you already, I kind of question how they found this podcast, but where can they find you on social media to digest all of the great goaltending knowledge you share, the great recipes you share, and everything else?
It's always at Mike McKenna 56. My dad's racing number, my number now.
Yeah.
I'm most active on Twitter, but also really active on Instagram. Instagram, of course, probably more pictures than anything else. Yeah. But yeah, I hope everybody enjoys it. I'm pretty open and honest on there. I do like to answer questions, and sometimes too, I'll also use my other Twitter handle that's at McKenna in game, and I'll live tweet games in season, and probably be using that a little bit more often this coming season as well.
Yeah. Well, and to prove your point that you're pretty responsive on Twitter, I may have badgered you a time or two to get on the podcast, and I don't know if you got tired of me doing so, but finally you're like, hey, yeah,
we're just finding the right time, man.
Yeah.
We just had to get it to work.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Mike, for taking time out of your day. We probably went longer than I anticipated. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, man. It's no surprise. I can't stop talking. So I appreciate you having me on. It's always great to talk to people especially from our era. I mean, we all share exactly the same experiences as a kid, all those same, those same memories. And I love taking those trips down memory lane and bringing them back to where we are today.
Yeah. Learning how to make proper skate saves and proper 2-pad stack recovery.
I can still do them. You line those pucks at the blue line and I can give you a skate save. Never used it in a game, but I could still do them.
I did when I was like a peewee and squirt, because I didn't know better, but I was talking to Bones from Nashville, and I'm trying to get him up here to do some content on my backyard rink this winter of teaching him how to do proper 2-pad stack recovery in his vintage gear that he's got going, because I learned it to that, repetitive over and over. We were taught how to get up. So, but anyway, thank you again. It's been fantastic. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate it too. Have a great day. Thank you.
It's safe to say Mike and I could have talked for hours simply because of the library of stories he has from his travels in pro hockey. I was thrilled to have Mike on the podcast as a guest. He is one of the top people I had on my list of goalies I wanted to talk to when I first started thinking of hosting a podcast. It took some time, but well worth the wait. I just might have to take him up on his offer to have him on again to hear even more stories. If you haven't already, go listen to his 6 Degrees with Mike McKenna podcast, where he shares some of the many stories he has from his playing days while talking to some incredible guests. You can find Mike on Instagram and Twitter at Mike McKenna 56, and on Twitter for live game tweeting on occasion at McKenna in game. You can always find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube simply by searching for Washed Up Goalie. Visit washedupgoalie.com for some great hockey-related content, my beer league hockey video highlights, and of course, all podcast episodes. If you want some Washed Up Goalie or Tendy Talk apparel, be sure to visit my Threadless shop by clicking the merchandise link on my website. If you like this podcast, go listen to the BLPA Big Show. It's the OG BLPA Podcast Network show where a couple of beer league players talk beer league hockey, draft experience shenanigans, and exploits from around the game. The show is hosted by Nick Jones and previous Tendy Talk guest Trish Dangle. Be sure to check out the full lineup of hockey-related podcasts on the Hockey Podcast Network as well. There are too many to list here, but shows like the Tracking the Storm podcast, the Habs Nightly podcast, and the Keeping Up with the Krakens podcast are all available. I need to thank the band The Zambonis for allowing me to use their music on my podcast. You can download their music on iTunes or listen wherever you stream music from. I'm always working on lining up other goalies to talk to. If you are a goalie or have connections to a goalie who I should talk to, shoot me an email at washedupgoalie39@gmail.com or send me a DM on social media. Let's not forget, if you are a brand who wants to sponsor the show, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. And finally, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on the podcast platform you're listening on. It's a quick action on your part that helps others find Tendy Talk. So until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your body square to the puck.